Welcome everyone to Managing Madness with Adrian.
And Carolyn.
Today we thought we'd start to kind of just begin to delve into a topic we've kind of knew we'd have to discuss, especially this year, but something I think we're both struggle with in different capacities, and that would be politics as we're in an election year. Today we're not going to go very in depth about, you know, too many policies other than potentially just our natural tendencies of where we may lie politically, but just kind of discussing the debate and things that seem to be on everyone's mind and topic and concerns and all of that, and just the challenges that come with just engaging in that sphere. I know I have a lot of trouble with that. I didn't even watch the debate, and yet I feel I know so much about it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the
I didn't.
beauty of social media, right?
Yep. It seems to be a huge thing of people talking. I don't know if you want to share. I know just before we start filming, you mentioned you didn't watch it either, but what has
Yeah,
been your
my takeaways.
just your
What
experience with it?
the hell? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Like, I just really get stuck in how is this the best that we have to offer? And, like, at what point? I mean, there's like a part of me that, like, wishes this would lead to kind of breaking down the two-party system.
Mhm.
And I also get that that's a little bit too idealistic for right now, and there's too much writing on the line to vote that way. Um, but I just how are we not making more laws against like the age in which people run? That I feel like the final, because I think there's some stipulation in it that like if a president dies and the vice president steps up and like serves less than 2 years, he can still, well, I say he,
Yeah,
right? They can still run two more consecutive terms. I just think you can't
I
be
think
on
so.
for more than 10 years, right?
I think that is.
Anyways, all that to say, because of that, I'm like, why is like 60 not the last time that somebody can get into office? I feel like that is plenty of time. 70, step down, enjoy your life and your accolades, and be done. The fact that we're voting between two way too old white men who are so disconnected from the general public is like absolutely mind boggling to me. And I'm not much one for conspiracy theories. However, this kind of makes me lean towards that. Like, what is the picture here? Like, what am I missing that this is who we're voting between?
Um. Well, that's where yeah. There's so much. Yeah, to go into that. Like you said, it is wild. I think one of the biggest things, yeah, that you highlighted towards the end is just there's no way these two individuals are connected to the future. Like and that's why for me, as we've discussed, I personally think a lot about kids and youth and the future, and that's why it's so hard to imagine that these individuals would be best prepared to kind of plan for the future when they will not live through the consequences of a lot of their own decisions. And that's just reality.
Term. Oh,
Even
sorry.
if they have, yeah, even if both of them have, full lives, and we kind of push towards the upper edges of life expectancy, they're still not going to see the ramifications of a lot of the decisions they have
Yeah, and policies
both of them
and
have made in power. And yeah, and how like this is how I can easily see just myself in my 40s getting so disillusioned. I see how youth and how others can potentially get disillusioned. Now, I'm saying that I don't know how engaged youth are in this election.
yeah.
One of the big things with this that we kind of discussed is we aren't going to get too deep into it because, well, I know I'll speak for myself. I know this is a topic I will need to learn more about and research and plan to do so.
Yes.
That
I know, I feel like I've got a couple months, right? Like we're
right,
in July here. So there's a couple months. And I do, before voting, like take time to educate myself and watch. And I mean, I'll watch more of the debates as they come up. But this one, I just kind of pled ignorance and what's the word? Like when I'm choosing to totally disengage, maybe just ignorance. But
I
I
mean,
couldn't, I have limited capacity in my own personal life right now. So to like expose myself to something that is so disheartening to think that this is what we have to choose between. I mean, I literally don't even know what to say because other than how is this where we are in 2024? It seemed like we made some steps forward and have really like taken some steps back, and it's, I don't know. It's an interesting thing I think about like within my family. Both of us lean pretty similarly politically, and I'm sure that'll come up throughout this too. It's kind of hard to hide our disdain of some people. But the reality is I have come from a really conservative Christian culture for the last 10 plus years of my life. So a majority of my friends, like that is the direction that they're going to vote. And I love them and I think they're good people. And we've just chosen not to really talk politics because even it was so funny. I was driving a couple of my friends' kids around. We were going on a hike and we like drove past like a Trump 2024 sign, and they like one of the kids like cheered and my kids were like and I'm like, you know what, sometimes we just really choose to like value relationships over politics and not have these conversations. But I also feel maybe I'm not modeling that well, like because there are like people that are significantly going to be impacted by the outcome of this election with the amount of power and decision making with the Supreme Court. Like there are a lot of big
yeah.
things riding on the line here. So pleading like oblivion or like it just seems super irresponsible, especially living in a country where we do have the privilege to have somewhat of a voice. I mean, I mean, of course, there's even like discrepancies on how much that weighs
Well,
in.
well, and that's why earlier you mentioned that as a kind of a conspiracy. That's where I don't see a conspiracy. I see a system that was designed to do certain things, and it does it quite well. And I think we're just, I feel as a society now in the United States, there's enough people that realize it's a foolish system. There's a lot of these things that are the way they're set up. They're
Yeah,
specifically designed,
to
ultimately to kind of keep the
promote.
status quo.
Yeah,
That's why we have, these older individuals, or even that's why it's not a discussion. That's why we have uh, life term Supreme Justices.
yeah,
How could that possibly really make any sense?
yeah.
Uh, but it is kind of, to keep the status quo, and that's not really, the
A
conspiracy, and
surprise.
it's
Yeah.
kind of the sadness to me. Yeah, it gets into realizing how much um, the system really is kind of rigged to favor money.
Old white rich men.
Yeah. And that's
Which,
why,
yeah.
yeah, especially right now, the system is for that. And even kind of, as you mentioned, of having potential acquaintances that aren't willing to talk to Trumpers. I kind of get that
Hmm.
because where I'm kind of at right now, as well as it's really, really hard for me to understand how you can be anything but. And that's why, like, it still doesn't, I still wouldn't do it if I was in this position, but I can somewhat understand the position of being a rich, old, white man and voting for Trump if
See, and
I
this is
held
where I
all
get
those
confused,
privileges.
right? Because I have some Hispanic friends that
Yeah,
are
yeah. And
hardcore Trumpers. And I'm like, I don't understand
yeah,
why you think anything he decides is going to serve you well.
right.
That,
And this will this will be a longer episode because I've had a lot of feelings that I wanted to express on that. And this is specifically to them. How to me it is embarrassing. It
mhm.
is really embarrassing for them because in my eyes, and that's where it's just I don't get it, and that's where it's just even going to the simple of, I mean, not to get into like too deep of that, but why it's even difficult for me to be friends with someone who subscribes to that ideology. I know they don't respect me as a human being. Like that individual doesn't respect me as a human being. That's why it's just like he doesn't respect women. There's nothing more that that individual respects other than himself, and that's where it's like the big thing for the debate. I wasn't expecting anything really from it. I kind of know what's happening with these two candidates.
Mhm.
I felt, that's why we'll get deeper.
I
We'll
love the
really,
meme of like, let's put one in prison and one in a nursing home.
But I mean, one of the things too is that that's what, as we go into that, and what really keeps me from engaging as much in the whole politics realm and stuff like that really is of how much of the BS I know I have to dig through to get to some of the actual reality and truths of the matter. Because going just into quickly for the debate, okay, one of the things is issue of like his age. But one of the things I consistently remind myself is this is someone who has a stuttering issue.
Yeah.
That's not going to get better with age. Why? How is like performative lying valued more than like, recognizing a full picture of an individual? Of like, I get the aging concern, but like, are we taking into account what's actually being able to, what actually comes out? And this idea that when the president, this idea of viewing the president as a king, which is very much, I think, kind of the things we were discussing, which is how one side of the aisle really wants to move towards. But how we view these presidents as these sole individuals that hold this mass amount of power versus
Right.
a political ticket of
Right.
individuals in a party of people who, yes, one is in the overall head of that, and you hope. But that's why it's just like if you're putting one person at the head of it, I'd rather put someone who clearly values the input of others around them
Mhm.
versus someone who only cares about themselves as an individual.
Right. And at the end of the day, this is why we have like checks and balances and like the system set up
Right.
that we can, that like one person, we've agreed, we left a monarchy, like
Right. Which
in a
very much,
whole messy way.
but which very
Yes.
much seem to be at risk now
Yeah.
with the way the Supreme Court ultimately operates and stuff like that, which is, yeah, the scary
Eh,
thing of knowing the severity of this decision and what's at stake, but just, yeah, having to engage with all the messiness and because it is media messiness, in my opinion. I don't think the
yes.
truth and the reality of it is, well, I do think it is messy. The system is messy. It was designed to be
Yeah.
messy.
But I do, yeah, the media definitely is not helping this situation. And I mean, I think back even to what was it, 8 years ago, when at the time my oldest would have been almost 10, and we watched the debate between Trump and Clinton. And I even just his takeaway was like, oh my gosh, like I thought I interrupted a lot, but like he interrupts so much. So then to like explain to a child that that was the person that was chosen to like lead arguably the most powerful nation in the world was like really disheartening, and but I also, especially like just my mindset in general of like, I do want to honor people and respect people as much as I can. And so many like conservative Christians who were so anti Obama, and like the memes that they would send me and the thing, and my response would always be like, okay, it's like, so have you prayed for them? Like, I mean, I get, and again, that gets into a whole nother thing of like, forget the prayers, like, let's get to policy, right? But like, if you're so quick to like pass judgment and jump to conclusions and whatever, but like, and you're priding yourself for being this like God fearing person that believes in the power of prayer, and that's not what you're spending your time doing, but you're like certainly going to tear down somebody in authority. So I was pretty convicted on that when Trump did come in to presidency of like, I do not like this human as a human, right?
Yeah.
But I value humanness. So like, what can I do to like show honor and respect while still trying to make a difference. So the fact that we're back here in 2024 is just really disheartening to me.
Yeah. And I
So,
it that really does seem to be, and that's where it kind of gets, scary, where it I am not forgetting the importance of this vote, primarily of because I have to recognize my privilege to be able to do so. How that is and very, but one of the things that I think will, as we get into, different policies and things, one of the concepts that really keeps ringing in my head is that this vote isn't, and that's why it's a vote has just never always been just for me. But
mhm.
this vote
Yeah.
specifically being specifically like not just about me. Like the amount of people that will be harmed if we
Mhm.
go one way versus another is something that like I have to reflect on my privilege, because I won't feel, as as a man, as just I won't feel the full wrath of the consequences.
Mhm.
I can't allow that, my privilege, to blind me of what is really at risk and how much I value other people and things like that. Valuing uh the queer community, friends in that, or going to the youth of how much right now, as I'm in LA sweating, and heat, we keep breaking records of heat, and seeing natural disasters in so many different areas, and all these first in the majority of science, the credible ones, all leaning one way, and still we are discussing policies that may eradicate all that stuff.
See, and I guess that is like such a hard place for me too, because I don't think science negates God. Like I don't. I think like that that would be a really hard thing for me to swallow. Like I think they like actually really beautifully come together, and it is so hard for me to listen to how much of the Christian community like, and I know this gets into the religious thing too, but I think politically it does a lot, right? Like
Mhm.
Christians typically vote conservative, and their decision making factor being like one stance, uh, which I just think is so irresponsible. And like, okay, but if we're going to value human life in general, like, why are we placing more value on embryos and, you know, fetuses? I don't know what the plural is, feti. um, then we are like human beings that are in existence already,
And the bodies
and
that carry them.
the in the bodies that carry. Yes, it's just so hard for me to understand.
Yeah, it's wild. And I think there is that um just clear difference between, there does seem to be a lot more discussion around a spectrum of topics and considerations on one side of the aisle versus, like you said, I know he's not the greatest person, but I am pro-life. Really,
Yeah,
how much are you really pro-life? Let's, how much is that individual pro-life? Like that, and that's where it's the wild thing. Like, what,
yeah. Like,
what
what
makes,
life does he value?
yeah,
Like one that looks like him, thinks like him. You know.
the only one, in my opinion, is the reflection in the mirror. Is the
Mhm.
only life he values, and that's why, to me, that's such a scary thing that someone would want to give that individual any power, um, at all.
Yeah. This is where I miss conversations with my dad, who passed away a couple years ago, because he did the first term vote for Trump, the second term did not. But just definitely, I mean, his family is Republican historically. Like, that's just so. But the conversations and the dialogue that we could have about, because his intent really was more like global, national, like policy, and again, like he was like, I don't really understand. He couldn't understand like who would really like condone Trump as a human being. Like, there's no arguing that he was like a decent person, but he was like, but his argument was like the things that happened. But also that's hard for me too, because I'm like, we aren't in a monarchy. This person doesn't have all the power. Like, change doesn't happen overnight. So like, what was really like ramifications of policies that have been set in place before versus what, and I don't know, it's so hard for me to even have this conversation because I do feel so like intentionally ignorant and uninformed and uneducated on it that I know there's a lot of people that could come at me saying something and I'd be like, yeah, I need to look it up.
Well,
But
but I think hopefully what we can communicate in this episode is the challenges of us beginning to re-engage in that, because and that's why we're both acknowledging the privileges we have and the fact that we do need to engage and become informed. But hopefully this episode kind of connects with some people who are having trouble actually doing that as well, because like as you're saying, it's just a lot to really take on, and for all these different factors that we've already mentioned. um Thinking about that quickly to come back, I also know, have affiliations too, who, you know, are more on the Trump side. And that's why for me, especially if they are from Mexican culture, which, as I've mentioned, fully acknowledge the roots of Mexican culture being the indigenous people who occupied the land, the African people that were brought to build upon the land, and the Spanish colonizers. I have a lot more love towards the first two of those roots, as I've, learned about their oppression and everything. And that's why, to me, I'm hoping this term I can get better at engaging with other uh, Latinos and Mexicans who kind of go that way. That is a fight though. I haven't been able, because I used to lose my temper really quickly, because that to me, like you mentioned, is just mind-boggling to me. Because growing up, and this can go back to just our growing up, I was never going to be a snitch or a mark. Those were like the two things I grew up. And being a Trumper is just like the biggest mark move you can possibly
yeah,
do, in my opinion. Like,
yeah,
it's like literally, I mean, and that's why I like, they may be able to talk trash, but I kind of know where I sit on the Democratic side. I know it's not, I know how I'm ultimately kind of being played with
hmm,
on this side. There's a little, but there's movement towards things I actually believe in versus
yeah,
literally someone who has continuously expressed that they care nothing about people in general, especially people who look like me.
yeah,
And it's just mind-boggling to, like, for me to connect with anybody who says but like anybody who
hmm,
can but that is really hard for me to really
yeah,
interact with and
yeah,
engage with, to be real. And that's why it
yeah,
is, but I also do kind of um know the importance of me kind of engaging that, because like as we mentioned, I do have a privilege that I am carrying into this
mm,
election with me.
yeah.
um so there is some importance
I know
in
it's
me
such
in
a
that
tough one
engagement.
because, and I mean, especially, yeah, I mean, I have so many friends who I do love who that is their inclination. And yeah, but what is my responsibility, especially now as I'm moving forward openly in this queer lifestyle, like of acknowledging things that maybe didn't directly impact me before, but now will, and impact my family um, and so many people that I love, right? Like I have a good handful of people that I mean on both sides, right? Of like very straight conservative and then very like queer liberal. It's a hard one.
So I did date once someone who was a Trump supporter. I know that's yeah. I took a while, like, deciding on whether or not I really wanted to share this, but
Yeah,
um, a lot of that was kind of the seeing. I see that they're a good person overall.
yeah,
Um, how much can I not let politics interfere? Was kind
yeah,
of part of the thing I went into. A lot of it was honoring the fact that I saw them as a good person
Uh-huh.
first and
Uh-huh.
foremost and things. But like the caution of that later was just like, can I do this? And part of it was just, can I? It really comes down to going back on why I even have trouble engaging with that on any level. Is it's really hard for me to really connect with someone who willingly supports someone who willingly speaks so poorly on people who look like me. It was the beginning of the presidency, so we kind of already Trump's presidency. So I kind of got to see what would happen under his presidency, and that's where it was just like, I get, I have, I wasn't in love or anything, but there's like a human love I have for you.
Mhm.
How are you able to, in your mind, break that in your support for this individual? Because you like, how do you not see that this individual willingly tries to harm these different communities, me being part of one that you say you care for?
Mhm.
And that's where it really it really gets mind-boggling for me, and that's where it really does get challenging. It is something I want to work on, because I do want to engage, going to the just like the Mexican angle and stuff like that. That's where it's just like, how much of this like self-hatred have you bought into as far as our people, that you would rather, and I mean, this can go into probably an episode on identity, because here in the United States, when I'm given a census, I don't have a race.
Yeah.
I have to put Hispanic, non-white, and then I have to kind of choose between white, which is what I've learned is often selected by Latinos, partly because it's the culture that is the most privileged, and
Yeah.
some of
So
us want
they
to
feel
be
like
part
more
of that
weight.
group,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But that's where it just comes back to, okay, what are you really willing to sell out, though, for you to be part of that group? And coming back to, how many people are you going to hurt with trying to just think of yourself in the big picture? And that's where
Hmm.
it's just really coming back to the idea of this vote being more than just my vote for myself. Me understanding that, like, this vote is actually for a lot of other people. Specifically, going back to, for me, it's going to be the youth. One of the big things, I think, just the vote is still hopefully preserving the youth's ability to make changes within government in the future. Whereas if we go down the pathway of, excusing the president for all their behaviors, whether they're president or not, just if they've ever been president, they get this, kind of free pass to do, certain things like that. If we start leaning more towards a monarchy, then that
Yeah.
really starts to limit the youth's ability to make change within a democracy. I still hold hope that the youth will, regardless of what comes, will figure out a way to create a change. The importance of this vote being
Hmm.
beyond just me, of
Hmm.
understanding how it'll impact the future. Um, and it really, like we said, like, I do believe the youth will create the change they want for their future. That may be an ignorant, optimistic hope, but as an adult, I don't want to keep making it more difficult for them. Like, and
Yeah.
that's where just like that's where I think it's just sad of how, like, so many adults, and that's where kind of how we started off with this conversation. There's no way these two individuals, either one of them, are going to understand the needs of the youth. They're
Hmm.
just so far apart in their life they can't be having the same type of life challenges.
Right.
Uh, at 80 and 20. Uh, but like, yet our system caters for the status quo and what is, versus those who are actually going to inherit all of these issues.
Yeah. And this is where I get so stuck. Like, how do things change? Like, how did we get here? How do we change things moving forward that there does feel like there's more hope for what's to come? I don't know. That's where I just
Mm.
really get stuck.
and that for me is actually something I think I want to get better at understanding
Mm-hmm.
before this election. Because I do believe we were progressing at a point in this country
Mm-hmm.
towards a direction and ideas I liked. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that really bothered a lot of people. An inclusive country really scares a lot of people. And I
Mm-hmm.
think they
Mm-hmm.
were very effective at organizing against progression.
Yeah.
And so now for me, it is better understanding of how those methods played out and what I can do now in this stage of the game to counteract some of those things.
Yeah.
Then that's why for me it's kind of beyond a lot of that's why for me the bigger thing with the whole debate was just how much of a circus storm it became.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if that's a
And like
media
how
storm or
embarrassing, yeah, like how embarrassing, like for our country as a whole, right? Like,
yeah. But that's where it's just like for me part of the big embarrassing thing is how I'm seeing more media focused on someone having trouble telling the truth, because of age, and a known disability potentially. It's known he has a certain issue that doesn't go away, and it can only become harder, more difficult with age as a lot of those skills you ultimately utilize through life are harder to implement. Um, versus someone who just lied for the entire time, and that's not like the bigger thing. That's not what the
yeah,
rest of the world is seeing us focus on.
yeah.
That someone can't just actually get up in front of national television and lie to us for
Mm-hmm.
over
Mm-hmm.
an hour and we're still going to be okay with that. Like that's to me, yeah, the embarrassment on a national scale. How like this that Biden is the main discussion in this.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um
I don't know.
yeah.
But,
It it really is wild. Um but something, yeah, just kind of something we thought we'd both kind of mention because we do want to have. We kind of started off in one of our first episodes mentioning how we both knew the importance of this year being an election year and all that, and how much that would create even further madness in our world.
so we got to figure out how to manage it. And
Yeah,
it's not by disengaging, even though that's the route that I've chosen lately.
but I think it was good for us to have kind of an episode on why that is the case for both of us because I'm not coming to this episode completely informed either. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
my position has also been of disengagement because of all the challenges that we've discussed that are going to come with it,
Mm-hmm.
but also the importance. Um, I know that also come with it. As we're kind of wrapping up kind of this episode and the concepts. What are something you think you're going to do actually to be better informed
Oh,
for the next time we discuss this topic?
that's a great question. I mean, I do think there's a lot of value in like trying to understand other positions, right? And I feel like I learned that in high school. We might have talked about this before when I was like on a debate and I had the side that like should have won, but as I did more research into like what my best friend would be arguing, I really was like convinced she would win because she's a lot better arguer and there was stuff to support that. So anyways, all that to say, I do think it's important to become educated on both sides, right? To like try to understand where people are coming from, like why is this their stance? How can they support this person? Why do they support this person? And then spend more time kind of developing not necessarily my counter arguments, but because that's not really my intent. My intent is like big picture, like what's best for us as a whole. Um, so yeah, then looking into like why different policies, different belief systems. I mean, I, I don't know. It just feels so daunting. What are you gonna do?
That is a good question because I'm ultimately thinking that I want to get better at honestly I think better communicating the importance of considering others during this election cycle is
Yeah.
actually something I think I want to focus on. Because on just as you were speaking, and that's why I kind of got caught up in my own words, one of the things that has worried me or got me stuck in the past is I can't debate or argue
Mhm.
emotion.
Yeah.
If someone's emotionally harmed, and that's why, like, as we go into, as I mentioned, like other Mexicans, I can't follow a logical path that gets you to support this dude. There are
Mhm.
several emotional things that have to happen and switch up in there for me to reach, and that's where I kind of want to get better at personally, of how I can help those individuals understand that, like, I don't hate them. I want the best for all of us. Like, how can I better communicate that one group does not want the best for any of us other than themselves? And
Mhm.
how that really doesn't include the majority of people. And that's
Right.
why, like, that doesn't include poor white males. Like,
Right.
like that's where
Yeah.
it's just like it's a very, very limited pool of who this actually like will
Serves.
help out and
Mhm.
serve. And I think a lot of it on me will hopefully be to inform myself and gain better patience with it. Because,
Mhm.
like you said, I think I don't think it is necessarily as useful to mirror some of the same behaviors that I dislike on the other end.
I know, right? But it's so easy to go. Well, and that was kind of like when my dad would talk about like the frustration and how people of color responded at some point. Well, like when they finally got to their breaking point and, were maybe like louder, more aggressive than one would hope, like as a white man. But I'm like, can you imagine like spending generations being oppressed and feeling not heard and not listened to? Because like look at how frustrated we get if I'm like momentarily not understood or heard or listened to. So to then be like voting someone in who just totally, anyways, I can't. I
And
have no more evens to can't, or no more can'ts to even or something.
no, I'm actually glad we're having this discussion because I do think you kind of highlighted a really good point to even like wrap up on, of just going back to, we're both coming into this with privileges,
Mhm.
but we're also both coming in with identities that are at risk
Right,
on
right.
one end of
As a
that.
woman, as a
Right,
person of color, yeah.
right. Um, but really, like you were mentioning, of having, like you were asking your dad, having us all look out to the people who are screaming for their very lives right now
Mhm.
and why they
Mhm.
are screaming for their lives right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
that's got to speak volumes, right? But if it's not your life that's impacted and it's not anybody that you love or care about,
well, and that this is where we can jump into, it kind of taps into our other episode. Then in that, if that's how you also carry yourself, don't
mhm,
also bring your Christian values into my
of
policies.
valuing human life, yeah,
Yeah, or
yeah,
anything into the schools, into everything that's being pushed right now. Don't
yeah,
try to bring these quote unquote Christian values that are not modeled or demonstrated by the
mm,
very individuals that you are trying to promote and bring into. Um, if that is really the rally call behind that side, is the Christian values and things like that, what better time to honestly look at your fellow neighbor and ask how you can serve them and how you could be
and
better
love them well and show them that you value and honor them.
their
Yeah,
existence, because a lot
yeah,
of people's existence are at risk here.
yeah. Well, that's a great way to wrap up. What do
Well,
you usually wish our people?
but that's why I loved how this came back, because I do think I think both of us are honestly, we're not only putting that out there, but I do think that that's a good message that I think both of us are, well, I know
Mhm,
I'm coming away from
mm,
this conversation with. Again,
mhm.
that understanding that this is bigger, and I do think it is a big message. But with
Yeah,
that, I really do wish every single one of you peace, love, and power.
yeah,
Hopefully see you in another 2 weeks. We will try to mix in some lighter episodes, but it's tough at this point. So a lot of our topics, we haven't even gotten into patriarchy.
Yeah.
that will most likely be potentially an hour episode. So there's a lot coming. But thank you for all of you who have stuck around with us. Please leave a comment, share, like all those algorithms as we're starting to build our episode catalog and hopefully start building our channel at this point. But thank you all of you who stick with us till the end. See you all in 2 weeks.